So my name's John Ricketts. I'm the founder and CEO of EKOM AI. Here with me is Jonah Santo. He's our head of growth. And despite the somewhat intentional and salacious title of the workshop today, I want to talk about product data, retrievability, discoverability, and ultimately how they really commingle, coexist in a very new era in terms of how brands position their products and how you win in the marketplace. So historically, we've kind of treated discoverability through a contextual lens of, all right, we have products, they're in my digital catalog, there's some content, there's some context, there's some photos. Okay, how do we drive discoverability? How do we drive search? And for the longest time, it was the same sort of playbook, the traditional SEO style playbook. Context mattered more, romance copy mattered more. And then around 2023, there were some seismic movements in terms of getting away from, ultimately a more subjective positioning of product data, both back-end and customer-facing, and repositioning it more from an algorithmic standpoint and from a parsing standpoint. And so through some early work with our customers, we had the good fortune to really dive into thousands and thousands, ultimately probably millions of PDPs to really understand what's driving discoverability post-2023. And that's kind of where we like to put the line of demarcation, because Google's BERT algorithm came out with a significant change that was incredibly beneficial for those that understood what the change was. It became a little bit less of a black box. If you can imagine anything from Google being less of a black box, it gave far more direction than we've ever had in terms of what do we need to do on product pages to actually win. And in a world where we're all trying to do less, it seems like rules are changing, tech stacks are overflowing. Now we have to do more, right? There's always something every week that we have to dive into and try to master in order to win what seems to be kind of like an unwinnable game. So through our research, we really came up with a very strong core group of customers that had small catalogs and large catalogs and evaluating performance data. And what we saw were trends that ultimately took us away from discoverability as we used to know it and into this new sort of era of retrievability. And so if you think about the internet as one giant database, and whereas we've had people like us performing semantic searches and queries over the last 20 to 30 years. It's done a nice job, algorithms have done a nice job of trying to serve us and surface data that best matches the intent behind that query. But what we've seen is, as algorithms are responsible for more and more surfacing of this data, there's speed, there's accuracy, there's precision, all these things are in play, that ultimately the product data page or the product detail page is turning into a product data page. And so what does Google want? What does Meta want? What does TikTok want? Algorithms thrive on well-structured, well-formatted data. They want to be able to have a higher fidelity match from a semantic query to appropriate products that are then surfaced. Okay, that's great. So now we've got brand X over here with 13,000 products that are live and active at any time in their catalog. How do we do this? Because then Google comes on top and says, all right, we also want to see helpful and enriched content. So which is it? Do we want helpful and enriched content, or do we want well-structured content? And the answer is both. And that's really where we started our efforts a few years ago, and have really seen this change coming and see a lot of really beneficial opportunities to really level the playing field from a traditional discoverability perspective that allows brands with even smaller budgets to succeed and win. But those that are prioritizing accuracy, structural compliance, helpful enriched content at scale are seeing some significant wins in the market. And it's a lot of fun for us to be able to share a little bit of our learnings, and hopefully there's some best practices to take from this. So we'll start with how's discovery changed, right? Algorithms love to prioritize individual PDPs. Okay, that's great. If I'm a brand with 500 PDPs, okay, that can be cumbersome to manage. But instead, I think you should look at those PDPs as individual sales agents, and when they're properly tuned, and when they're properly oriented to what the market is looking for, very powerful assets. We would argue they're probably the most powerful digital asset that many brands are just not really paying any attention to. We've seen this creep where your large search providers, whether it's social or traditional Google, ultimately they're going to be the category page. If the better they can get at surfacing best sort of product matches, the better experience their customers are going to get, the better their revenue models look, so on and so forth. And as we move into this sort of AI-driven and intent-based era of search, your PDPs have to stand on your own. And the biggest blocker historically is the scale issue of managing hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of PDPs at scale, and essentially putting them into an orchestra and having them, march on in harmony and synchrony. And that's very difficult, which is why product data pages for so long were just static assets. So really the core message today for us is that your discovery starts with retrievability. It's thinking about how your products are performing in a marketplace and sort of get away from this notion of the marketplace and you've got consumers that are behaving irrationally and performing searches that are, kind of matching up with the products that you're selling, and really thinking about the marketplace as a database. And so that's where it starts and stops. So what does a database really need? It needs well-structured information, first and foremost. Databases rely heavily on data hygiene and data compliance. So what does that mean? And Jonah will get into this in a little bit, but it's things like not exceeding character counts when Google tells you we don't want to see more than 100 characters in a particular CMS field. We see that all the time. These are unforced errors that lead to suppression across the digital catalog. But we get it. It's a lot to have to manage, and there's already a lot that's going on. But we have a way out of this, and so we'll work there. So treat the internet as your database, less like your storefront. If it's properly tuned to the data side, it will be a high-performing storefront. But really taking a data-first mindset on this. And then prioritizing structure. Algorithms have to be able to understand and how they do is they parse information from the structure of your PDP. And so let's use the example of a catalog with 10,000 products. If you look at SEO title, SEO description, your backend metadata, maybe your description HTML, your headers, your alt text, 10,000 products, across 7 sort of key fields in a CMS, that's 70,000 data opportunities that are either going to help you or going to hurt you. And so that's either a problem that scales or it's an opportunity that scales. And so what we know, it's pretty clear. And what search engines want and really kind of demand today is structured, complete, and aligned product data across the PDB, feed, and metadata. They want fresh content. Regularly updated is still a black box term. A lot of data that we're seeing is quarterly optimizations put you in a really good place. There's clearly such a thing as an over-optimized product page. We know that Google loves to put PDPs in the penalty box for trying to game the system or over-optimize. What we really see in working with brands across many different sectors, from hospitality to apparel to furniture, quarterly optimizations are sort of an ideal state, an aspirational state for most right now. At the very least, annual optimizations just to signal and trigger the reindex that, hey, we have helpful, enriched, well-structured, well-compliant products here. And then there's an amplification effect that occurs. Once these individual PDPs begin to surface more, Google recognizes, Meta recognizes, all the algorithms fundamentally are underpinned on the same sort of logic basis. When customers are clicking into the product page, they're converting, they're making purchases, those are positive signals that are going to get attributed back and say, hey, this is a really strong catalog here. They've got really good data, and it's very helpful for the people that are using our platform to search for products like this, so we're going to amplify it. So we can kind of all get our heads around this, and we're throwing a lot of new rules. And then ultimately, it leads to 2 outcomes of product data. The brands that prioritize product data that we see, they win. They're in a great position of strength because it allows you to focus on higher level strategy. I spent a lot of years as a founder in the digital health space, and as you can imagine, obviously working inside systems of record, similar to Shopify on like the Epic and Cerner side, and managing large amounts of patient cohort data and things like that. You can take a granular approach, and you have to. I mean, there's a lot of parallels between the practice of medicine and managing a large digital catalog, believe it or not. You're largely relying on a lot of data. You're trying to coordinate attribution points for the best possible outcome of what's in front of you. And so in order to position that, it starts really with fundamentals. You go into a doctor's office and you set up with a new provider for the first time, and they're probably going to want a CBC. And they want to get a baseline of, hey, what's going on? The human body is a very complex system. I would argue that digital catalogs are also a very complex system, clearly on very different scales, but same principles apply. So you get a baseline of this, and one of the things that you can always control is structure, right? Even if you take high-performing keywords out, take strategy, take romance copy, step one is structurally aligning your PDPs to what's going to be rewarded. And the structural rules are known. That drives a tremendous bump. You experience suppressed PDPs when you don't follow the rules of those that are trying to surface your data. And so if you're taking the approach of I'm a guest at the house of Google, I want to try to assimilate as best I can. I want to try to play by their rules. And good things will happen from that perspective. And then obviously, when you get all this stuff in line, the results tend to speak for themselves. You've got visibility that rises, you've got higher conversion rates. We've tracked secondary and tertiary outcomes from some of our customers that show reduced returns. It's really difficult to drive direct attribution to how an optimized product page can facilitate reduced returns, but I think we can all agree that when the consumer has, more context, more content in a well-structured format, they tend to understand what they're buying a little bit better. And so what does this look like? We'll bring it back to sort of medicine and biology and anatomy 101 here, right? You've got, what we see, across all of our customers, and we treat all of our customer brand data as a cohort from an analysis perspective. We can individualize performance and measure attribution on a one-on-one, but we want a large body of evidence. We want, and what we currently sit on are millions and millions of PDPs with historical performance data to present day performance data. That helps, the fundamental sort of algorithms that help drive EKOM and what we sell. It makes us a better product. And so just starting here, and these are things that can be done that are well within control, buttoning up SEO titles, buttoning up meta descriptions, product names, HTML content, H2 headers, and then ultimately just aligning and updating frequently. Measure your own data, put yourself in a position to win. But from the perspective of, if you look at it from an AI perspective, like where are we going with search? And if AI is going to be responsible for surfacing more data, if you look at it historically, Google serves up information in a deterministic fashion, right? You put a query in, it says, here's a list, right? Here's your list of things that we think best match what you were looking for. And what's different with AI and language models and Google's BERT algorithm, being built on NLP is that it relies on a probabilistic outcome. And so when you're going from a deterministic, here's my search, okay, what I return to you is a list, a deterministic list of options that I think is best, to a probabilistic environment with AI, where the token is trying to create the next best option for the next word. That creates a lot of change. It creates a lot of opportunity, in our opinion, too. And so what we do know from a tokenization perspective, too, is that they thrive on well-structured data. So, you don't have, the good news is you don't have to guess. You don't have to guess if, Claude or Grok or, any of the open models are going to surface my data in the way that it's written. Make sure it's well-structured first. Contextualized content will follow, and you'll be very pleased and very surprised with the results there. So the biggest challenge that we had in front of us, just anecdotally, was, okay, there's a problem. Search is changing. GEO, SEO, any TLA, three-letter acronym you want to put at it. But fundamentally, it's really rooted in traditional sort of SEO best practices, okay? And when you get the blocking and the tackling and the fundamentals aligned, that enables digital catalogs to be able to perform at a level that's actually truly optimized. So how do you do it at scale? That was the biggest problem, because before we had automation, before we had access to language models and algorithms and machine learning, this was either farmed out to agencies, or maybe you tried to do this in-house, and now you've got people spending time inside of source of truth data sets, filling out individual fields, trying to comply with certain rules. Very time consuming, and very low yield and utility, which is why sort of Romance language was prioritized, and how the PDP read to a human was prioritized. And now that we've shifted into more of a structured environment, this creates so much opportunity for brands. SEO is fundamentally changing, providing opportunities outside of traditional, keyword stuffing and domain authority and all the blah, blah, blah that has hindered and blocked. And we're moving into an era that's the way it should be, right? Where your products are going to stand on their merit, at least from, a non-paid perspective. And those that prioritize this and actually pay attention to the fundamentals, for the first time in a long time, have a real opportunity to win, which is really exciting. And that's apart from whether they use, our software or if they do it on their own. It's just fundamental. But what we discovered was, if we could tie all this together and scale it, that created tremendous value. There's certainly value with small catalogs, 100 to 1,000 products, but it's still manual work. I mean, this is stuff that's not, it's not related to, it is related to strategy, but you're going to have somebody inside the fields doing this, making changes and optimizations. And then for brands into the hundreds of thousands of products, like the scale becomes completely, it's lost. And so you have to have some level of automation to do it. And so ultimately we built our offering around this. It's like, how do we help you scale and adjust to the changes in the market in real time as they're occurring? And effectively putting, at least the product data surveillance, the product data compliance, and the product data performance on autopilot. You don't have to worry about it. Algorithms change, EKOM changes to absorb that impact type thing. So we've had a lot of fun over the past couple of years. We've learned a lot. We are, I think, in a really good position to be able to share our data across the e-commerce sector in general. We get to kind of see where trends are leading. But most importantly, we love seeing the outcomes from the brand side. And for me, we were a startup before we were a scale-up. And as a small, non-legacy, non-established brand ourselves, it's hard, right? Are we going to try to pay for our own discoverability? How do we get in front of, customers? How do we tell our message? And you look at it and it's like, there's 1,000 things you can do. What's going to work? And so ultimately, we actually took it back to the basics for ourselves, started producing a lot of content around this idea of retrievability, which isn't a novel idea for us. It's being talked about in some circles, but I feel like it's gaining a lot more momentum in the last 12 months than it has probably in the last, really ever. But we see the results ourselves. EKOM AI is now getting surfaced as an AI-generated link on a lot of AI search queries. We don't have to spend, time, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months toiling away hoping that we build enough authority to be able to be surfaced. And so we're seeing the fruits of this ourselves, applying a lot of the same strategy. We don't have live product data pages, but we still have a structured website. And so taking a lot of our learnings that we're helping brands win with, apply them to our own, and we're seeing the same results. So it's like the Bosley hair commercial where we're not, only the leadership, but we're users as well. So with that, I think, just wanted to run through some quick slides to sort of frame the conversation at this point, at least from a didactic, theoretical perspective. And Jonah's here to really give some more practical guidance on how we do it. And then obviously this is a very, this can be a topic of high conversation, so we want to leave plenty of time at the end if there's questions, and just make it more of a two-way conversation instead of us sitting up here trying to hammer new information into you before lunch. So, Jonah?
Okay. How many brands do we have in here? Cool. Okay, awesome, perfect. So anybody with Levi's or Tractor Supply? Because I'm going to apologize, I'm going to share a couple of their examples. And apologize to AV because they told me to stay in the middle, and I'm not going to be in the middle, so sorry. But ultimately, I want to just share a couple of examples of like, what does this look like in real time? What does it look like on a PDP? And so with Levi's, they do a really nice job, to be honest with you, compared to a lot of the data that I see. I look at hundreds and hundreds of these a day trying to figure out and find opportunities. And so, again, if we go back to the rules, we know titles need to be between 50 to 60 characters. This isn't our tool, we're building our own, but it's a good way to visualize this. So this information is the off page. You're not gonna see this is in the code, so your customers don't see this. But ultimately, this is what the algorithms are gonna be scraping. And so what Levi's has done nice here is from a formatting perspective, they are structured properly. They've got the title, they've got some keywords, and they've got that dash or that straight line with their brand. And so that's one of the pieces that is really, really important. From a character perspective, we would recommend that they be between 140 to 160, so they're just outside of that. But if you notice, one of the things that's happening here is they put a character limit on that. And so it's actually truncated, which for the algorithm's perspective is going to create confusion. They're making hundreds of decisions in milliseconds. And so we want to make sure that we have complete thoughts there. And then what we know is that this information here that's off page needs to align with the on page. And so if you recognize where it got cut off, it's because they're literally taking the product description, giving it the character count variable, and then pausing it. But from a structure perspective with their on page, we know that we want this to be about 100 to 300 words. They've got the bullet points. So they do a really nice job overall compared to, like I said, a lot of the brands that I look at. And then again, going to apologize to Tractor Supply here because would love to be able to get in front of them here one of these days because I think we can do a ton of help with them. But you'll notice in terms of like, they've got the structure proper because they've got the @Tractor Supply, but from a character count, when you're looking at 50 to 60, they obliterate that. And so again, from an algorithm's perspective, they're gonna move on because it's just too much to interpret. And then when you looked at Levi's, they had the ability to cut that off or truncate it. Where you look at a Tractor Supply, they literally are just copying and pasting their product description. And so it pastes into here. Literally, you'll see they start to connect here because you've got your features. And so those are the pieces that over time, the algorithms are gonna look, and honestly, the easiest thing for an algorithm to do is ones and zeros. And so they're gonna look at your entire catalog, the performance of your products, and every time you win or they present you and you convert, that's a yes, so they're gonna show you more. And if it doesn't convert, that's a no, it's gonna be a 0, and they're gonna continue to suppress all of your products. And so all of the research that we're seeing is most brands spend a ton of time on their products that are performing, but it's the ones at the bottom of the catalog that aren't, that usually get left behind and need a ton of TLC. And over time, because the algorithms are smarter, they're actually gonna take the entire performance of your catalog, and so even your good products are gonna start to get suppressed based on your bad products. And so really, really important to have the consistency across your entire catalog. And so I don't know about you, but I didn't wake up today like, man, I can't wait to spend all day in spreadsheets looking at product data to go get this optimized. And so ultimately, from our perspective, how do we go about solving this problem? And so just want to spend a couple of minutes here. I'm not going to try to overly pitch you on our product, but just want to share with you how we're going about trying to solve this. And so it's really hard to fix problems if you don't know where they are or where they lie. And most people's catalogs or their product management isn't set up for that. And so the first thing that we want to do is bring visibility into the issues that exist. And so the key categories that we found is one, alt text. Image alt text is really, really important. One, it's just the right thing to have and do because of the ADA accessibility of it. But two, from a liability perspective, there are tort lawyers out there all the time running bots trying to figure out whether you have alt text. And if you don't, they're going to show up at your doorstep ready to try to take some money from you. If you're an SMB, that typically lands between a $15,000 to $50,000 lawsuit. On the higher end, if you're a larger enterprise, that can be in the 6-7 figures pretty quickly, and they've had some previous court litigation that happened that way. And so part of it is we want to make sure to just give you that baseline table stakes piece here. And so bringing visibility to all of these key pieces, metadata descriptions, we showed those rules, product titles, and so really want to take care of those pieces. The other element that we touched upon is just the refreshing. And so keywords aren't as big as they used to be. You remember the old traditional keyword stuffing? You'd put as many keywords as you could in your metadata, you'd do it on page, and hopefully through all of that, you'd get your product shown. Well, that's actually gonna get punished. And so keywords have lost they're not quite as important as they used to be. It's context over keywords now. But what we do is we actually go out and look for semantic keyword trends. And so it's really important that you wanna be aligned with how buyers are shopping. And so what words are people using to find products like mine, and then let's inject those into your product descriptions so you're always aligned with where the market is moving. And so we bring visibility into what those opportunities are, the SEMrushes, the Ahrefs, the Screaming Frogs, those types of platforms. And then ultimately, then social media, the open graph tags, just making sure you look really good on Facebook, look good on Instagram. Okay. And so with that, we've got that. And then I can't tell you how many brands we talk to where they have products that are on their page that Google can't even index. So if Google can't get to it, neither can your customer. And so want to bring visibility into all of those. And so we're doing surveillance across your entire catalog, allowing you to be able to see and recognize where those issues exist. You can click into a product and be able to see right away which issues you have. And maybe you don't want to solve all of them on that product for whatever reason. You just want to be able to fix one. You can hit the apply fix. But maybe you're like, you know what? I just want this to be 100%. So we leverage AI to be able to go in and within a couple of minutes have that entire product ready to all of the rules that are happening within your catalog. So we've got a couple of minutes here. Just got notified. So I don't want to dive too much further into this, but just wanted to give you a brief overview of how we're bringing visibility into your catalog in a really new way. So yeah, we got about, I think, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So turn to questions. Oh, yeah, of course. So one day it's going to be EKOMs. Today it is SEO one-click. It's a free, SEO one-click meta and one-click there. It's a free Google extension. Highly recommend it. Super good to bring visibility just to make sure everything's looking good. I don't know what we're doing there. Okay, there we go.
And I think if you're looking for some real-world examples of really well-structured product data pages that are not e-com customers, Levi's does a wonderful job. They invest in product data. It's very clear to see. IKEA is probably at the top of the list.
As good as it gets. Sure.
Their product data is as good as it gets. So if you're looking for some to model after, get a knack of diagnostics in this space, particularly around things that are so important related to the PDP, was the first step for us to solve it. It's like we have to know what's actually hurting the catalog before we can then go about fixing anything. And then from there, it was a building block. Okay, now that we can see it, now we can pinpoint it, now we can automate the targeted interventions at any given time. And so, the theory is, hey, at some point your catalog is going to be 100% from a health perspective. And that's a good thing. If there's ever any changes with, a platform like a Google or a TikTok or a Meta, if those rules change, we're scanning, we're observing that, we'll build that into our code base, and that way you don't have to worry about it. So your products are always going to be positioned in the most optimized from a structural standpoint and a performance standpoint as they can be. And ultimately, you shouldn't have to think about this stuff because it's tedious.
Where this gets really fun is like everything we're talking about is reactive, right? And so what we didn't realize is we actually built this backwards, is we didn't bring out any of the visibility into the intelligence. We built all the hard stuff first, and now we're having to go back and put a pretty interface on it. But what's gonna get really fun is when you start to look at moving forward and being proactive, like, hey, there's a product having a viral moment in my space. We think that if you were to make this small adjustment, it's going to align you with that and get you into that sphere. And so we're not quite there yet, but once we start to go from being reactive to proactively helping your products perform, that's gonna get really, really fun. So we're really excited for that, and that'll be coming, I'd say, probably in the next 6 to 12 months. So we're really looking forward to it.
Obviously, your product is Google and English native. So if I'm selling in Korea and Japan, are you optimizing for those markets and potentially different search engines as well already?
Continuing to test. I think the biggest thing for us is just you have to have a system that can manage all of that. So we talk about how many different data points just within Google that we're managing. Now times that by every single different platform across every language. That's a lot to manage within a PIM. And so if you've got the ability to do that, we've got the ability to provide it.
How do you balance like surfacing product data for an algorithm, but then also a human has to read that and make a purchase? And seeing like a button that just says fix all, like scares the hell out of me that somebody's going to just create a word salad out of a product description.
twofold there. I can start on the word salad side. So we have enterprise customers who, to your point, are looking at this, seeing AI. And so they actually have copywriters within their team who still help. Like, even if you want to have somebody involved, you can. Like, we don't have to send a fix. You can make small edits and then push to just give you that comfort level. But either way, leveraging a platform like EKOM is going to make it way more effective and efficient because you're working from the PIM. We've already given you a head start. And so if you want to go make the small edits and then push to your website, you can do that. So helps prevent that little barrier there to create that comfort level.
So, and think about it too, the first rule of EKOM, drawing back on a lot of years spent in the healthcare space, is do no harm, right? There's opportunities with long form content to get a little squirrely with hallucinations. You were working with probabilistic language models, and things happen, right? So a couple of things. Product detail pages are, within your system of record, they're structured by fields. And these fields have typically very small character counts, very small word counts. So right there natively, the opportunity for hallucination and word salad is mitigated significantly. Second of all, EKOM's not rewriting product descriptions. Like, think of this as we're taking the car to the body shop, and we're buffing out dents, getting scratches out. There's social signals and keyword data that we've algorithmically prioritized, and say, hey, your product page is gonna benefit from these new keywords being there. Like, these are the things that we're talking about. It's not wholesale rewriting of product data. We're taking what's existing, because that's obviously been approved, right? And then we're making it better and more optimized from a compliance standpoint, not a content standpoint.
Is it easy to revert? Can you undo a change?
Nope. Once we do it, it's there forever. No, one of the first features our engineers built was a revert all button. I think that's a best practice in engineering, software engineering. Yeah. It's revert all, and then everything goes back. But no, and what we see is that we have customers and brands that are they're under strict regulation, right? And their attorneys love to get involved because they're selling supplements or they're selling firearms, and there are claims and things you can say and you can't say. All that can be accounted for. I think the use case that we built EKOM for is we're not rewrapping a language model to create fluffier, better worded content. This is targeted intervention of things that are pulling the digital catalog down today. We're remediating errors. So think about it from an information security perspective. You're paying for a provider to keep, to monitor your network. You want to know if there's cyber threats or cyber attacks and things like that. So you've got to be able to monitor it, and then when it's detected, you've got to be able to mitigate those threats. And it's basically the same premise on the information security side, now applied to a digital catalog.
Does your product analyze the image itself or just the alt text?
It's coming.
You want my answer, or do you want the head of growth's answer? You probably want his answer.
We're working on that. Yeah, we're close.
Yeah, I mean, it's, this is a fun space for us to be able to build in. Just the efficiency gains from an operational perspective are massive. Larger catalogs, now you don't have to spend any time here. Then you layer in the performance side that's on top of this, and there's some real opportunity. So we love it, clearly. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.